Malcolm Turnbull's leadership may not have been dealt a fatal blow yet, but as we've heard, it's far from on safe ground. Political reporter Jane Norman takes a closer look at why.
Mr Abbott.
A former Prime Minister turned political assassin.
Where are this Prime Minister's convictions? What are his convictions?
With a devastating critique, Tony Abbott signalled his patience had run out. For 3 years, he's been seething on the backbench, furious at the man who took his job.
There'll be no wrecking, no undermining and no sniping.
This is a rivalry that goes way back.
Malcolm Turnbull.
It was in 1999 that the Conservative monarchist was first pitted against Malcolm Turnbull, a moderate at the forefront of the Republic movement. They'd soon be on the same side in Parliament, embodying the broad church that is the Liberal Party.
We must retain our credibility of taking action on climate change.
Malcolm Turnbull won the Liberal leadership, but in backing the Rudd government's emissions trading scheme, Tony Abbott found an opportunity to strike.
I accept that Malcolm would have preferred that I didn't do this.
Mr Abbott led a revolt among climate sceptics, and it was on. He seized the leadership by a single vote, overseeing a seismic shift in the party's policy.
I do feel humbled and daunted by what's ahead.
Tony Abbott handed Malcolm Turnbull the communications portfolio, and the pair struck an uneasy truce.
Malcolm is going to be Mr Broadband.
Mr Abbott's popularity plummeted and his captain's calls irked colleagues.
Knights and dames in the Order of Australia.
Malcolm Turnbull styled himself as the progressive leader the party needed to win back Middle Australia.
We have lost 30 news polls in a row.
Mr Turnbull won the ballot but struggled to unite the party. And after the narrowest of victories in 2016, he never really gained the authority to pursue his agenda, something Tony Abbott has exploited.
I think Tony ought to devote his attention overwhelmingly to ensuring the return of a coalition government.
Well, here we go again. Another being brought down not by voters but by their party. Not since John Howard has a leader lasted a full term. So if history is anything to go by, Malcolm Turnbull's days in the top job appear to be numbered. Just another chapter in a decade of toxic politics.
Jane Norman reporting. Andrew Probyn's still with us, and let's also bring in Insiders host Barry Cassidy in Melbourne. Andrew, events have been moving very fast in Canberra. Malcolm Turnbull survived the day, but how is his support in his own party tonight?
Well, it turns out it's thinning, Lee. Peter Dutton got 35 votes today without a proper campaign, without a pitch to colleagues and without even ringing around. He's 7 votes short of becoming the Liberal leader, and I have spoken to Liberals today who voted for Malcolm Turnbull today, but next time around would vote for Peter Dutton. Now, I said before that there were 3 resignations of ministers, and this gives you an idea of how fast-moving it is. It's now 4. So we have James McGrath, who is the Assistant Minister, the Prime Minister himself, Conchetta Fierravanti-Wells, Michael Sukkar and Angus Taylor in the last few minutes. Now, these are in part, I imagine, designed to trigger a deeper crisis. The resignation of James McGrath will particularly hurt Malcolm Turnbull because James McGrath was part of the political coup against Tony Abbott. Now, his Prime Minister's support is continuing to hemorrhage, and I'm told that the leadership issue is likely to be revisited this week or at least in a fortnight's time.
Barry Cassidy, to what extent is the Prime Minister himself to blame for today's attempted coup?
Well, a significant minority of Liberals would never accept Malcolm Turnbull as one of their own, and they were determined to make life difficult for him. But he made life difficult for himself as well, because rather than fight them, he chose to appease them, and appeasement never works. And the worst example of that was yesterday in the party room when he threw in the towel on energy policy. Now, that was a policy that he'd gone around the country selling that policy, and yet he had the overwhelming support of the party room, and yet even then he gave in to a minority of rebels, and of course that was the end of certainty for business. But the other issue that you raised, the Longman by-election, that was important as well because the LNP's primary vote went from 39% to 29%, and yet Malcolm Turnbull tried to dismiss that as a typical swing that you get in by-elections. Well, that's not the way that it was seen in Queensland. They wanted Malcolm Turnbull to say that he had learnt lessons from that by-election, and he didn't say it, and I think that was reflected in the numbers today. I think Queenslanders were angry about that.
Just finally back to you, Andrew. You said that you think this leadership issue could well play out this week. I mean, in what form? In another spill? Is there any prospect that Malcolm Turnbull would voluntarily stand aside?
That's a possibility, but I think largely it's up to what Peter Dutton does now. Now, he is getting closer, obviously, to having the numbers, but there is a very serious complication that we can discuss right now that affects Peter Dutton's candidacy, and that is the Nationals, curiously enough. Now, I understand that Darren Chester, a Nationals frontbencher, believes that Peter Dutton is simply unelectable in the southern states, and that Darren Chester and up to three other Nationals are willing to sit on the crossbench rather than have Peter Dutton as Prime Minister. So we have a situation where Peter Dutton might snatch the numbers for the Liberal leadership, but not have the confidence of the House to remain Prime Minister. And in a curious way, in this context, Malcolm Turnbull's saviour could be the National Party. Now, in this context, you could have a situation where a compromise candidate comes through the middle, someone like Scott Morrison, because he is neither Malcolm Turnbull or Peter Dutton. So very complicated, complex issues confronting the Liberal Party in days ahead.
Several of which would compromise a real crisis for the government. Andrew Probert, Barry Cassidy, thank you very much.